If you look at the brain scans of a severely depressed person, you won't just see, like, a sad mind.
Right. Yeah, it's not just an emotion.
Exactly. You will see a city suffering this massive 40% structural power outage. I mean, the actual physical architecture of the brain is literally shrinking.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because for centuries, we've treated this condition as just, a lack of willpower.
Or a character flaw.
Yeah, totally. We've historically demanded that people just think their way out of a state where their primary biological tool for thinking is clinically compromised.
It's an impossible standard.
It really is.
And that is the paradox we are unpacking today. So, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission for this session is to explore a super fascinating, really unexpected synthesis across 3 completely different disciplines.
Yeah, we've got quite the stack of sources today.
We do. We're pairing modern neuroscience, specifically Dr. Neil Nedley's clinical research on the frontal lobe, with the psychological framework of Aaron Beck.
The founder of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right. And then our sources cross-reference all of that clinical data with this deep theological exegesis of ancient biblical texts.
The convergence is honestly striking. You have neurobiologists, cognitive psychologists, and ancient theologians operating in completely different eras.
Yeah, different paradigms entirely.
But they are all mapping out the exact same holistic roadmap for overcoming hopelessness.
And the big promise we want to make to you, the listener, right out of the gate is this. By the end of our time today, you are going to see that depression is not a life sentence.
No, not at all.
It is a biological and cognitive state that can actually be physically rewired. But to get to that rewiring, we have to start with the hardware.
We have to look at the sheer physical reality of depression.
Which is staggering when you dig into Dr. Nedley's data.
It fundamentally reframes the whole conversation. Like, let's look at the prefrontal cortex, which is basically the executive command center of your brain.
Right, the mayor's office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is where moral reasoning, complex problem solving, emotional regulation, future planning, all of that takes place right there.
Right.
In a healthy brain, this region is super active. It's directing traffic and keeping the more primitive emotional centers of the brain in check.
But Nedley's research, he did clinical studies with over 4,000 participants, and it shows that in major depressive episodes, that command center just goes dark.
Just completely dims.
We are talking about an observable, measurable 40% decrease in frontal lobe activity. Blood flow restricts. The lights in the mayor's office are literally turned off.
And it goes deeper than just diminished electrical activity, too.
Oh, right, the physical tissue.
Yeah. The research reveals actual structural degradation. In severe prolonged depression, neuroimaging shows hippocampal shrinkage.
And the hippocampus is what, the memory center?
Yeah, the brain's primary center for learning and memory. The physical tissue actually gets smaller. And concurrently, we see this massive drop in a vital protein called BDNF.
Brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I've actually seen BDNF described in the sources as, like, biological fertilizer.
Oh, that is the perfect way to visualize it. BDNF promotes the survival of nerve cells and stimulates the growth of new neurons.
And synapses, right.
Yep. It is the molecular foundation of neuroplasticity. Basically, it's your brain's ability to heal, adapt, and, learn new things.
So when a brain is depressed, that fertilizer is severely depleted?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a command center powered down, a memory center literally shrinking, and a complete lack of the chemical necessary to grow new pathways out of the darkness.
See, knowing that this is a deeply physiological crisis makes me look at how society handles this with so much frustration.
Oh, completely.
Especially faith communities, historically. If we can put a patient in an fMRI machine and measure a 40% drop in frontal lobe activity, why on earth has this been treated as just a lack of faith?
It's baffling.
We tell people who are experiencing a measurable biological power outage to just, pray harder or read more scripture.
It's a really tragic misapplication of theology,
Mm-hmm.
especially because treating depression as a purely spiritual failing directly contradicts the very biblical texts those communities revere.
Right. The sources point us to this prime example in the Hebrew scriptures. It's a remarkably precise clinical account of a major depressive crash.
Found in 1 Kings chapter 19.
The Elijah model.
Yeah. And the context of the story is just wild. The prophet Elijah is coming off arguably the most intense spiritual and public victory of his entire life.
He is operating at absolute peak human performance. He has this massive confrontation on Mount Carmel where he essentially defeats, 450 rival prophets?
Yeah, 450.
Mm-hmm.
And then he prays, and ends a 3-year national drought.
The adrenaline and cortisol pumping through his system at this point would be astronomically high. I mean, the guy physically sprints ahead of a chariot in a rainstorm.
He is totally redlining his nervous system.
And immediately following this massive peak, he gets a death threat from Queen Jezebel. And the guy who just stared down an entire nation suddenly snaps.
He hits a wall.
He flees into the wilderness, sits down under a solitary broom tree, and just spirals into active suicidal despair. He begs for his life to end.
He says, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers."
Which is heavy.
It is. But notice the cognitive distortion in his statement. He is completely catastrophizing.
Taking one external threat and extrapolating it into total worthlessness.
Exactly. The adrenaline is worn off, his frontal lobe is totally compromised by sheer exhaustion, and his limbic system, that primitive threat detector, is just completely overwhelmed.
He has hit a physiological wall.
And the intervention here is what I find so profound. God doesn't show up with a sermon.
Right. There is no theology lesson.
No motivational speech. And crucially, no rebuke for a lack of faith.
The very first intervention is entirely somatic. It's physical.
An angel appears and provides warm bread and water.
A snack.
Basically, yeah.
Right.
A nap and a snack. Elijah goes back to sleep. The angel wakes him a second time to eat and drink again, and explicitly notes that the journey is too great for you.
The text dictates that physical restoration must precede spiritual instruction.
That sequence changes everything. Sleep and nutrition had to be addressed before God ever asked Elijah, "What are you doing here?"
It validates the biology we were just talking about.
Yeah.
You have to put some fuel back into the system before you can expect the prefrontal cortex to process complex emotional concepts.
Or spiritual concepts, yeah.
Yeah.
But resting only recharges the battery, right? It doesn't fix the corrupted software that drained the battery in the first place. Once the body is stabilized, you are still left with a mind that has been conditioned to produce despair.
Which brings us out of the wilderness of First Kings and straight into the clinical office of Dr. Aaron Beck.
Beck is essentially the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
And his discovery of this corrupted software completely revolutionized modern psychology.
It really did.
Yeah.
But, his breakthrough actually came from a place of failure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the 1950s, he was a Freudian psychoanalyst. The prevailing theory of the time was that depression was caused by an unconscious need to suffer.
Like an inward-directed hostility from childhood trauma.
Exactly. And Beck set out to scientifically prove Freud's theory.
But the data wouldn't cooperate, would it?
Not at all. It entirely rejected the premise. So Beck made a crucial structural innovation. He moved his patients off the psychoanalytic couch.
Where they were just passively free associating.
Right, and he put them in a chair facing him, where they had to actively collaborate.
And in doing so, he noticed something Freudian analysis had completely missed.
The patients were experiencing this continuous background hum of negativity. These weren't deeply repressed, unconscious traumas. They were spontaneous, continuous streams of negative thoughts operating just slightly out of conscious awareness.
Beck termed them automatic thoughts.
And he discovered that in depressed patients, these thoughts reliably clustered into what he named the cognitive triad.
Which covers all the temporal bases of human existence, right?
Yeah. It's a negative view of the self, meaning I am worthless or defective. A negative view of the world, meaning everything is against me.
Life is an endless series of impossible demands.
Exactly. And finally, a negative view of the future, meaning nothing will ever improve and I am hopeless.
The insidious nature of the triad is that it feels objectively true to the person experiencing it.
Yes, it feels undeniably real.
And our sources draw a really fascinating parallel here, connecting Beck's clinical discovery directly to the ancient writings of the Apostle Paul.
In 2 Corinthians chapter 10.
Right. Paul discusses the concept of mental strongholds. And when you map that ancient concept onto modern neuroscience, the overlap is undeniable.
Because these automatic thoughts aren't just fleeting clouds passing through the mind. Through a neurobiological principle called Hebb's law, they build physical architecture.
Right. Hebb's law states that neurons that fire together wire together.
Yes. So if you repeatedly think, I am worthless, your brain actively constructs a neural pathway for that specific thought.
And the more that pathway is used, the more the brain optimizes it.
It does this through a process called myelination.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It really is. The brain wraps that frequently used neural circuit in myelin, which is a fatty sheath that acts like electrical insulation.
So it makes the thought travel faster and with far less metabolic effort.
Exactly. So the stronghold is a heavily myelinated neural highway.
It becomes the path of least resistance. It operates on total autopilot, and it acts as this super aggressive filter.
Yes. If a friend gives you a compliment, the stronghold rejects it. If a minor setback happens, the stronghold amplifies it to prove that the world is against you.
Okay, wait. Let's pause on the myelination aspect for a second, because you, the listener, might naturally wonder, if my brain is automatically wiring negative thoughts, am I permanently damaging my own hardware just by having a bad month?
That is a terrifying prospect.
Right. Am I digging a hole I can never climb out of?
It's a critical question.
Oh, okay.
And the answer is no, you are not permanently damaged, but you are creating a self-sustaining loop.
Okay.
Beck realized that these automatic thoughts are not merely symptoms of depression, they actively maintain the depressed state.
Wow. So they keep the loop going?
That myelinated highway of negative thoughts keeps the amygdala, the brain's emotional threat detector, in a constant state of panic.
And as long as the limbic system is panicked, it suppresses the prefrontal cortex.
You are locked in.
Okay. I have to stop you there, because if you are listening to this in a severely depressed state, you are probably rolling your eyes right now.
Oh, for sure. Maybe even feeling a bit insulted.
Yeah. The idea that you just need to, think better thoughts to fix a 40% structural brain deficit sounds incredibly condescending.
It really does.
How do you force a paralyzed system to rewire itself when the power grid is completely offline?
Well, you don't start with the thoughts. You start with the body.
Okay.
You bypass the broken cognitive system through a clinical intervention called behavioral activation.
Acting before you feel like acting.
Exactly. It is the deliberate clinical practice of taking small, meaningful actions long before the motivation to do them arrives.
Because a depressed brain will tell you, wait until you have the energy.
Wait until you feel motivated, then you can engage with life. But behavioral activation forces you to act against that internal messaging.
You don't wait for motivation to act, you act, which creates the biological environment for motivation to eventually return.
Exactly.
But how does someone force a body to move when it feels like they are walking through wet concrete?
By shrinking the scale of the action until it bypasses the brain's resistance. We are not talking about running a marathon here.
Or organizing your entire house?
No. We are talking about microactions. Sitting up on the edge of the bed, drinking a single glass of water, walking to the mailbox.
So what is physically happening during those microactions that breaks the loop?
It comes back to BDNF, the brain fertilizer we discussed earlier.
Right.
Physical movement, even mild metabolic stress from just getting up and completing a microscopic task, triggers the release of BDNF and dopamine.
You are artificially generating the chemical environment your brain needs to grow.
You are hand-cranking the generator.
You are manually turning the lights back on in the prefrontal cortex, literally one glass of water at a time.
That's it. And once you have just enough BDNF flowing and just enough cognitive juice restored, you can finally attack the corrupted software.
You can attack the cognitive triad.
Which brings us back to the biblical strategy outlined in 2 Corinthians 10.5. The text commands the reader to take every thought captive.
The language there is so specific. The original Greek word is aichmeltizontes.
Hopelessness, yeah.
It is literally a military prisoner of war metaphor. It means to hold a spear to the neck of the thought. You do not passively observe it, and importantly, you do not try to suppress it.
The distinction against suppression is vital. Modern psychology relies heavily on the ironic process theory.
Oh, the white bear experiment.
Yes, if I instruct you right now, under no circumstances, to think about a white bear.
My brain immediately summons a white bear.
Exactly. To ensure you aren't thinking about the bear, your mind has to constantly monitor for the concept, which, ironically, keeps that neural pathway highly active.
So suppression just strengthens the stronghold.
It does.
So you arrest the thought instead. When the automatic lie pops up that says, everything is ruined, you stop it on the highway. You interrogate it.
And then you have to replace it with something stronger. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the brain.
Right, you cannot just remove a negative thought. You must lay down a new neural track.
And the sources point to Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, as essentially an ancient 8-part cognitive filter that mirrors the restructuring process of modern CBT.
Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things.
It is a rigorous checklist for evaluating incoming data.
Yeah.
Does this automatic thought pass the test?
So if the cognitive triad whispers, you are fundamentally defective and abandoned, you arrest it. You run it through the filter. Is it true?
No.
So you actively replace it with a specific authoritative truth.
And the theological sources make a really compelling argument that biblical promises carry a unique weight here.
Right. They aren't just self-generated affirmations. It's not just a desperate attempt to look in the mirror and convince yourself that you're smart or capable.
Exactly. It is an external anchor. Let's look at how that anchor works against the most devastating lie of the cognitive triad for a person of faith.
The belief that their depression disqualifies them from God's presence.
Yes. The replacement truth offered in the sources is Psalm 34.18, quote, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit."
The English translation is beautiful, but the original Hebrew words bring a totally different level of intensity to what is actually being promised there.
Oh, absolutely. The Hebrew word for brokenhearted is shabar. It does not mean sad or mildly bruised.
Yeah.
It means violently shattered into pieces. And the word for crushed is daka, which literally means pulverized to dust.
Pulverized to dust. Wow, it is the vocabulary of absolute, total psychological devastation.
So the text is explicitly saying that God does not require you to pull yourself together before he approaches.
Quite the opposite, actually.
He is nearest to the shabar, to the shattered. He is drawn to the pulverized.
So when you arrest the automatic lie of abandonment and replace it with the empirical authoritative truth of Shabar and Daka, that your lowest point is the exact magnet for divine proximity, you begin to myelinate a new pathway.
You are leveraging neuroplasticity for your own survival. Every time you intercept the lie and replace it with that specific truth, you are physically unwiring the old stronghold and constructing a new architectural reality in your brain.
It is a remarkable synthesis of body, behavior, and belief. We started with a shattered physiology and ended with the precise cognitive tools needed to rebuild it.
It really is an incredible framework.
Let's pull all of this together for you, the listener. If you are navigating this dark landscape, the core takeaway is that you are not permanently stuck.
No, you are not.
The darkness is a biological and cognitive loop. It's not a reflection of your identity. You start by stabilizing the hardware, prioritizing sleep and fuel, honoring that Elijah model.
Then you bypass the lack of motivation with behavioral activation.
Right. Taking microactions to generate the BDNF fertilizer your brain desperately needs.
And finally, you take the corrupted automatic software captive, replacing the lies of the cognitive triad with targeted authoritative truth.
It is a comprehensive roadmap out of the dark. But there is one final overarching mechanism for healing that all of our sources converge on.
Yeah, and it is a prescription that feels entirely counterintuitive when you're fighting for your own survival.
What is that final piece?
Service to others.
Honestly, that sounds almost impossible. If someone barely has the energy to drink a glass of water, how do they serve someone else?
It's about the neurology of focus. When you are severely depressed, a network in your brain called the default mode network, or the DMN, becomes hyperactivated.
Think of the default mode network like a camera stuck on selfie mode.
That's a great way to put it.
Every lens, every filter is pointed inward. You are analyzing your own pain, your perceived failures, and your hopelessness on a continuous, agonizing loop.
Engaging in service, stepping into someone else's world to alleviate their burden, is one of the most potent natural antidepressants we possess because it physically forces that camera to flip outward.
It interrupts the DMN's self-referential loop.
Exactly. The neurological center of gravity shifts away from the limbic system's panic over self-preservation and moves into the frontal lobe's capacity for empathy and outward action.
You stop looking at yourself. Even a small act of service disrupts the stronghold's narrative that you are useless.
It really does.
So here's a final thought for you to carry into your week. Who could you reach out to or help over the next few days?
And this is the crucial part. Do it not because you feel completely healed.
Right. Don't wait until the power grid in your city is fully restored. Do it because the very act of stepping into someone else's story might be the exact spark your brain requires to jumpstart its own biological healing.
Sometimes, the way to break out of our own agonizing selfie mode is to focus the lens on someone else.
It's where the healing begins.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.